Hello and welcome to episode 71 of the Sohbet Punx podcast where we discuss meaning, transcendence, awe and spirituality with a small s. My name's Siobhan.
And I'm Dave. And that was our professional intro.
I know. It's never going to happen again. Well, actually, the aim is that it always happens because we're professionals.
We've written it down.
Professional human beings, we are.
You just made a very good point that 2 episodes ago was episode 69.
We didn't even mention it.
And we didn't mention A, the fact that the episode was number 69, and B, we made no
jokes.
Hilarious, funny jokes.
Fanny jokes.
No fanny jokes. No funny jokes on this podcast, Siobhan.
Oh, sorry.
Is 71 funny in a sexual way, or a poo way, or a wee way?
I can't see. I'm staring at the numbers, desperately trying to see something funny in them. Kind of like the 7's like protruding their crotch into number 1's face. It's not very nice, actually. If
I don't know what you're seeing.
Not in the loving way of a 69.
I think it depends on, you know how some people draw a 7 with a little line through the middle.
Oh,
some people don't, and you haven't. For the listener, just to say.
No, I was just seeing the point of the 7. If that was someone's like legs behind them and they're thrusting at the other person. In fact, if the 1 was there, it would like be someone on their knees presenting their penis to the other person who was just dead straight.
But if you were someone who drew a line through that 7, that could be someone with their arms fully back and their penis fully forward and a dildo up their arse, couldn't it? If you think about it. If you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, that's what a 7 looks like.
Spirituality with an extraordinarily small s. Wow.
And the number 1.
Just lying like a plank.
Corpse.
Ooh,
so it's somebody.
I was just going to say someone very uninterested.
Somebody
not
with a
corpse.
Dildo up their arse, presenting their penis with their arms fully back to a corpse. That's what 71 is, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh God, we should have made a 69 joke and just left it at that.
Yeah, we definitely should have. On this episode, we're going to be continuing the discussion that we had on our last episode, and we're going to be venturing into whether we should all be giving up politics. So that's something to look forward to. But if you haven't listened to the last episode, I think, in fairness, the last probably 3 episodes have just been one conversation that's kind of continued on from the week before.
Which sounds like professionally planned. It's just not.
It does. I don't know whether anybody else will realise that, but to us, that's definitely what's happened. So if this is the first time you're listening, I think you can probably listen to this standalone and see whether you like us or not. But it might be worth at least going back a week, if not maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And see if you like us then.
And then see if you
make it this far.
If the 71 joke hasn't completely killed you off.
If you make it to the episode where somebody's showing their penis to a corpse, then we'll know that we've done a very good job. Well done, Siobhan.
Oh my God.
If you're listening to this, we are a success.
Oh gosh.
We'd like to start the podcast by describing something that we have each done in the last 2 weeks, which has created a sense of meaning, transcendence, or some sort of, I suppose it doesn't really work to say or spirituality with a small s, but I suppose something that fits into those headlines. So what have you done over the last 2 weeks, Siobhan, that has fitted into those headlines?
Well, mine probably is very basic for some people, but it hasn't been so basic for myself. And I think I've mentioned this thought in the last couple of weeks anyway, because it came up through a few podcasts that I've listened to. But
Arthur Brooks again.
Arthur Brooks, yeah. I'm going to try not to completely obsess over that.
Siobhan's wearing a t-shirt that says "I love Arthur."
I haven't actually watched or listened to any podcasts in the last 2 weeks that has him on it, but I did watch one that had someone who disagreed with him, so that was fun.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
We should all be doing that.
Yeah, no, it was really good. It was really interesting because I was just like, gosh, I'm so for that person. And now this other person's come along and been like, I went to a conference with him and the Dalai Lama. Can you imagine? And he stood up and said, what I really think that Dalai Lama said is this, that and the other. And she was like, I just don't agree. And she goes, I think I told him that I think he was all full of bullshit in front of the Dalai Lama. I was like, I like this woman. Anyway, that's not the point. Something he raised was about keeping friends, especially in your adult life. And
we talked quite a lot about that last week.
Yeah.
The last episode.
Yeah. And I don't remember what my relation to that was. But in the last 2 weeks, I've seen my dad for the first time in, a year.
You also threw
almost.
Your dad under the bus quite severely on the last episode. It should be noted.
I feel bad about that. I do feel bad about that. But yeah, the last time we saw him was New Year's Day. The last time I saw him as well. So we went to a gig, you, me, and my dad.
That's right.
In London. And we did this because it's really hard to know what to buy people for their birthdays and for Christmas. And something I've come to realise with at least my dad, but I think it actually applies to all our friends and all our family members, especially in my world. Like, I can't speak for everyone, but I think I'm coming to realise it more and more, is that it's experiences and being with people that's the present. Your presence is a present. Mm-hmm. Your presence is a gift. That's the word. And
there's me. I've just bought my nephew a magic set. So shit present.
And we're away for his birthday.
We've already missed it. I bought it 2 weeks after the birthday.
That's the wrong nephew.
Oh.
Have you been speaking about the other nephew? Anyway, it does not matter.
My presence is their present.
So anyway, something I committed to after... So we went to a gig with my dad last year. Actually, it was me, you, your brother's best friend, and my dad. And he had the best time, even though the gig wasn't really that good. It was
Let's just quickly describe the gig. It was fantastic. It was Paul Di'Anno, the original singer from Iron Maiden,
who
with
used
his own
to be quite the looker
band.
and quite a little punky man.
I don't know if he was a looker. I mean,
all
right, okay. Well, I
don't
don't know. We were watching some videos of him yesterday, so I didn't realise you were getting all 71 with him.
No,
because he's almost a corpse. But
he can't say
he's not aged well. He's not very well, and he's in a wheelchair. And he just came out in his little electrified wheelchair. And I know you shouldn't laugh at that sort of thing, but it was funny because he just sort of sat back in it, almost like he was on a hospital bed.
He really leaned into it in the physical and metaphorical sense.
In the underworld,
I didn't know the underworld even had a ramp. I don't know how he got up there.
I don't know how he got there. But anyway, yeah, and everyone was sort of. It was like a normal gig in every other respect, but there was just this man singing, sort of laying down.
In a wheelchair.
It's very unusual.
Which is fine.
Yeah, I know.
But anyway, my dad absolutely loved it. It was a really, really, really good evening with him. So anyway, since then, my Christmas present to him last year was taking him out for dinner because there was nothing else that we could do, and he doesn't want for anything, and if you bought him anything he'd be very upset that you spent your money, but it was a commitment to looking for gigs that we could all go to, be that in Norwich where he lives, be that in London in the middle, or if he wanted to come down to Hastings or anything in between. And then this year didn't really show up a lot of gigs, so we haven't managed to do one until this weekend just passed, and we just dragged him along to a gig that we knew that we would probably like and maybe he would like. There wasn't
his
actually
presence was our
yeah, and we didn't really have because there was no other gigs anyway. So we went to see a band called Battlebeast. They are very good, but seeing an hour and a half of them is much. It's a Finnish power metal, and it's good.
Supported by fantastic band who were sort of symphonic. I think they were even more battle metal. They were sort of it was like German drinking songs with a distorted guitar behind it, but
and very with just a god element. If we want to get spiritual,
we've seen a picture of them. He didn't have it on stage, but he does like to hold a broadsword.
And this was the main reason you like them, because you want a sword. But anyway, but so absolute long winding way around to just saying. I saw my dad for the first time in a long time. We went to a gig. The gig wasn't great, but it was just having that experience. And as we left, I realised he'd had a really nice time. It was really lovely to see him. And I just thought, sometimes we put off seeing people for the effort we think it'll be, we haven't seen each other in such a long time, so let's plan something proper. And actually, before the gig was just ambling around trying to find a pub, any pub, and we ended up walking some distance to try and find one that wasn't full of people. And so there was no thought into that, no planning, no let's make sure we go somewhere really nice. And that bit is the bit that you remember. It's all the conversation, it's all the being with someone. I say this also because I'm about to go and see a friend I haven't seen in 8 years this evening, and we've just been desperately trying to find a day where we can all hang out, and it's taken forever to get to this point. And it was because we were trying to plan for let's have a whole day, let's do all this really interesting stuff, make sure we're both off work. And actually the long and short of it was, right, I'll just come up to you on a day when you're working, so we can at least have 3 hours to hang out in the evening. And actually, you haven't seen each other for 8 years, so you think, we need to make a real big plan. No, 3 hours hanging out with someone you haven't seen in ages is the beginning of that.
More than enough.
It's more, no, it's not more. But it's the beginning. It's. I just think we all make these kind of. There's always a weird excuse for not doing something, and it's not because you necessarily don't want to do it. It's more the opposite. You so want to do it that you want it to be really good and really interesting, and we'll pick the perfect place, or we'll make sure we meet in the middle, or just like actually like one of you just needs to get to the other person, go to wherever the nearest place to your train station is, and just hang out. And so I'm realizing that more with seeing my dad. And I'm really looking forward to seeing my friend tonight that I haven't seen in ages, and it's turned into the most blasé meet up when it's actually been 3 or 4 months of trying to work out a whole day with events, and actually it's just going to be going and getting off a train, seeing someone and getting back off the train. So there's something about seeing friends and seeing people that mean something to you, but it's not the event, it's the just seeing that person. So not to faff trying to think of the best thing to do. It's like, you shouldn't need a distracting event. You should just go and hang out with that person. Just do it.
I strongly disagree with you.
Oh, fuck right off. Why?
Because actually the gig was brilliant.
Oh, no, the gig was...
And
I was like, what the fuck?
Everything you said is correct, apart from the fact that Battle Beasts were superb.
No, they were superb.
It was just that they were too good. If anything, they had one incredible song, and they just do it lots of different ways, which is what you need to expect from power metal.
Yeah,
it was a room full of, and I hope this doesn't sound sort of derisory. It probably will do.
Derisory?
And I might have made that word up. So in which case it definitely won't sound that way. I'm not saying this with derision. That's what I'm trying to say. It was a room full of the nerdiest. You can probably, most people listening to this who have any idea of music, can imagine the sort of audience that would go and see a power metal band or a symphonic operatic metal band.
Called Battle Beast. Where the singer is wearing like fairy tale... devil horns, not devil horns, but like those horns. The ones that are in the baddie in Snow White.
At one point the singer had to go off, I assume, to rest her voice, because she has quite the voice, and to do that for an hour and a half, I don't know how the fuck anybody does that.
Voice.
But anyway, so she had to take a little break, and so the bass player sang, what was it? Something
Can
from
You
the
Feel the
Lion
Love Tonight? Yeah.
Just for fun, and everyone had a lovely time. There was no I think the beauty of gigs like that, and we've been to a few, we went to a metal festival, I suppose, fundamentally, when we basically we only really listen to heavy metal nowadays. And there's something, because there is absolutely no sarcasm involved, the people that are watching this music, I don't know, maybe there is a little bit, but it feels completely out of time with the current time. It's not postmodern on any level.
Yeah,
it is literally just some people that really like they definitely all either like Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, or probably computer games of a similar ilk, role play, Warhammer,
watching jousting,
that kind of stuff. And then they all get in a room. I doubt that they probably socialise very much. I'm sure there's an awful lot of neurodiversity going on in the room, and none of them look very nice. No, I'm not being rude. I don't think they consider themselves people that look very nice.
Yeah, no, I know you're saying that in a supportive manner.
Well, no, and I include myself in that too. Like, it's just this group of people that probably don't have the most fulfilling social lives. And don't really necessarily know that when they go to a gig they're even doing something social, because I'm sure there's a lot of people on their own, or if they weren't on their own, they're probably with their friends that they met on the internet, or people that they play computer games with, or whatever. I don't know how people meet anymore, but what they were doing was extraordinarily social, because it was again, not to make it too religious, because it's not religious in any way with a capital R, but with a small r it very much is. Everyone's singing every single word. No one can dance, but they're all dancing. They're all completely out of time. Doesn't matter. There's no skill in the room whatsoever apart from the band on stage.
But you are wailing along to that band, and everyone's doing it. It is a wonderful thing.
They'll never forget that night.
Yeah.
These bands like these, because it's funny. the European kind of real pappy, like power metal bands.
It's rife, isn't it?
Well, it's not. I don't know that it's rife. I think that it's got a decent following in the UK, but it's not like it is in Europe at all.
Oh no.
But the thing is that the people that love it fucking love it. So bands like this, they played. It was the Electric in Brixton, which I think is 4,000? No, 1,500. Sorry, it's 1,500.
Yeah.
Sorry, sorry. Sorry, I don't know where I got. I think I was thinking of the Academy. But that's about right. They'll probably, in the UK anyway, most of those bands won't play venues much bigger than that, but they'll ram those places out.
Yeah.
And everyone who likes them will go.
And actually, that gig was the only show that didn't sell out their entire UK tour.
Right,
yeah,
right.
it must have been extraordinarily close.
Yeah,
like on the night, it might have, because it was rammed.
Yeah. And those people just fucking love that thing.
Yeah.
And to most other people, even people that like alternative music or metal or whatever, it just sounds like absolutely ridiculous.
That is Eurovision to the nth degree.
And it really is. It does sound like Eurovision, the Eurovision.
Well, I mean, there's a band that performed for Germany last year that literally then went and played at Wacken because they are exactly that.
Yeah.
And that freaking, is it that Finnish band or
Lordi,
yeah. You know, there's been tons of bands that do come through that way. You're right. This power metal thing is European. Just people love it, and
but they're big in Europe. In Europe, they're big. You know, in Europe, these bands, because they all come from different countries, I suppose. I think Battle Beasts are Finnish,
yeah.
And one of the other bands that played were Austrian. I think they're all from different places, but respectively in their own countries, they're literally having hit songs in the charts, which of course. No way are they ever going to touch the UK charts. No. Which is, I think, says something really bad about our culture.
We're having a garage revival. I mean...
Are we? Another one?
Apparently.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it keeps coming back.
I thought we were having a grunge revival.
Oh, there's grunge... Well, it depends. Are you alternative or are you know...
Oh, God, are you a grunger?
The charts aren't having the grunge, I don't think.
Townies probably listening to that.
Grungers. I was just thinking, when you were describing people that are really into the European stuff, and it's without sarcasm, and it's without really even...
Irony, sorry. I should have said irony.
Irony, not right. Yeah, without irony and without and with just enjoying it for the pure joy of it. Anyone who listened to our Scar episode, I think it's people who follow Scar, it's the same. It's this timeless thing that other people that like music go, ugh, I mean, that's not music, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
But you do it because it's pure joy. Whether you like it or not, you can't hear those things and be like, you know what, I don't like it, but I can look at a room full of people going mental to it and go, actually, I do get why you're like that. Maybe I don't like it. It's the same with power metal. Yeah. You know, that's when we went to Wacken, we got really into it because it's a European metal festival, so a great deal of it is power metal. And watching people just like have the best time. That Angus whatever his name is McSix. That is pure stupid pap, but he can bloody sing, and they write songs. I mean, I disagree with you hard
there, for the record. I mean, he's
excellent.
Excellent.
You're very you don't get a say because you're fully papped. You're weepy every time these bands come on. But you could, even if you don't like it, you can look around and appreciate. This is fucking fun. This is silly. This is fun, and I can get why people come in their thousands to watch stuff like that.
Well, I think particularly with and maybe we'll probably end up getting into this because in a way, in a world where everyone's continuously superficially going on about how shit everything is, like the way that most of us have dealt with that in the last probably decade, in reality, is just to sort of throw ourselves further into that shit. Well, the thing is, there's always been, and I'm sure there's loads of other examples of this, it just so happens that we've sort of stumbled across this one. There's a world where people have just been going to heavy metal festivals and just having a nice time and getting pissed with their mates and like having, again, probably not having a very fulfilling social life, but having the opportunity to have one in these. And, you know, if that's not fucking meaning transcendence and all, and spirituality.
With quite a big S.
With a fucking huge S. I mean, some of these bands really do sing about God, I think.
I think the one that you're quite obsessed with at the minute, it does sing about God.
I don't think they're a religious band, though.
No.
And in fairness, one of their songs that they played live was they're called Serenity, by the way. One of their songs that they played live was about Henry VIII and how he got his end away a lot with all of his wives.
There you go.
I don't think they didn't use that phrase. They were Austrian.
I don't remember what they said.
Yeah, and then they followed that up with one about Richard the Lionheart. So I mean, they like English things, I suppose. I mean, it's just so blunt, to the point, silly. It's just like, I like history.
Yeah.
Here's a song about history.
And I think at a time when you and I being more based in like the punk community, and especially, you know, punk has always been, the point of it is to speak out and to maybe be political, or maybe, you know, some people say that they're not, but I guess usually
I don't think anyone's saying they're not.
No, well, I think no, not nowadays. And yeah, and actually there's a pressure to, there seems like this societal pressure to have an opinion and to say it and to stand by it, especially with the advent of social media and all that stuff. So then you go to I can definitely see why people get into power metal. It's just like, there's politics, and then there's singing about the eighth, and swinging a big sword around. That Angus McSix specifically sings songs about He-Man. Like,
he loves He-Man.
It's just such like.
I mean, in a way,
yourself.
It's millennial bullshit, and it is like, to some extent, I can critique it pretty hard about like, it's very much the babification of culture, which. You know, is happening everywhere. But without getting into what we're going to talk about later, because I think fundamentally this sort of is the point. The thing is, describing the punk scene in that way is quite interesting, because actually, yes, you're right. All of the bands feel obliged to sing about the 5 subjects that they have to sing about. Yeah. But in reality, we also spent a little bit of time, and unfortunately we had to miss a bit of it because we went to this power metal gig. But we also spent a fair amount of time at a punk festival this weekend. And I'm not basing it just on that, but I'm basing it on the fact that I've been to, you know, a million punk gigs over the last 10 years. Actually, the reality is whilst everybody feels obliged to virtual signal in certain ways, when everyone gets in the room, it's no different. Everyone's just having a nice time. No one's talking about any of these things. And if they are, then it feels a little bit forced and showy. And that's one of the problems, I think, which again I think is basically what we're going to be talking about, is that we all feel obliged to kind of say that we're doing certain things, but actually in reality, are we really doing them? No. Or are we just going and getting pissed with our mates and then saying, oh yeah, but it's really important because we also sing about these 5 subjects that are really important, and all the people in the room already know about the 5 subjects.
Exactly. That's the point, isn't it? Everyone in the room, you're speaking to people that don't need to hear it. And actually, probably what's more important, given everyone's isolation and when they're on their own, feeling this desire or obligation to be opinionated online and just beating themselves into a misery doing that, the time where you're seeing people face to face probably should just be pure joy.
Well, what everybody needs really is just a fucking cuddle, isn't it?
Just a big old cuddle.
No, but I'm sort of being serious.
Yeah,
fundamentally, we all, you know, pretend to be all of these different stupid things, but actually, really, we just want to say hello to some people that we recognise.
Are you all right? God, I haven't seen you in ages. It'd be nice to catch up. Let's not spout political crap at each other. Anywho, David, I've said my bit. What have you done this week that has brought you some sort of meaning, transcendence, or spirituality with a small s?
Well, mine follows on quite a bit, I think, from what we were talking about last week, and what we started talking about last week, and we obviously went off on tangents because we always do, is about the fact that kind of all of these things, being happy in life doesn't just involve the simplistic feeling of happiness. It also involves lots of complex other things going on, such as putting yourself in fairly uncomfortable positions. And I'm not talking about the number 71 again.
Well, one of them's quite comfortable, the corpse one. But anyway,
the corpse is. We'll all be so comfortable when we're dead, Siobhan. We covered that last week as well. But I did something which was. Well, in fact, you know what? And I don't think it's as a result of what we talked about, because I think I've been doing this for a little while. But I've done a bunch of things in the last couple of weeks, specifically to cause myself discomfort, in order to. But all of them have ended up leading to joy. And one of them was that. So I work in a bookshop, and we have events. And recently, I've taken over the sort of organisation of these events. And the events tend to be a kind of interview with an author and then a signing, as hopefully people will know, because they will have been in a bookshop and maybe even been to an event, but
I don't know.
Probably unlikely. Anyhow, and so we had someone coming in, and I really loved his book, and we were trying to find someone to interview him. This was months ago now.
When you say trying to find someone, like who are you looking for?
Well, not to get into the nuts and bolts of it because it's not very interesting. But I mean,
Sorry.
so we've got a few people who are authors themselves, local authors who write in a very. So, for example, we have one lady who is a crime author herself, and she's a local, and so. When we get a crime author in, she'll interview them, and so it obviously helps her too, and we can promote both of the respective all of their books.
I get it. But, so there's prospective people who would normally interview people when someone rolls around. Okay,
and then in the past, sometimes we don't need an interviewer because people will just give a sort of bit of a talk or whatever. And honestly, I've not been involved in it long enough to really tell you. I don't know who's done it in the past, if I'm honest. But it's certainly not been staff members who work at the shop. Right. I know that much because no one really wants to do that. And so we'd asked a few people. There's someone who works at a local library, I think, who's done them before. Different things like that. So we've asked a few people. No one could do it. And I had read the book, loved the book, and quite liked the idea of doing this interview, but also knew that it would be extraordinarily uncomfortable and very stressful, and it would probably be a nightmare for the 3 months that I had to wait to do it, as far as what was going on inside my head. But that I'd probably get a lot out of it. So I put myself forward for it. Well, I didn't put myself forward for it, I suppose, because I was sort of in charge of deciding, but I just said I'll do it.
To yourself, you sat down with yourself.
Well, no, to my manager, I suppose. I mean, it's not. I'm not. I don't just run the fucking place by any means. So I read the book and had, whilst I was reading the book, took a lot of notes. Whatever. Got some questions together, and then just waited. And it was a very stressful thing to do because it's not really something I've ever done before. So obviously, we've been doing this podcast for a while. We have done this podcast live before, but it's extremely different to be talking to your wife, or then I suppose partner, on stage, and to sit down with someone you've never met before, who's a real proper person. No offence, Siobhan.
None taken. Absolute twat.
who's written like a number of books, is actually fairly well known within his field, obviously extraordinarily intelligent. It has lots and lots of huge academic background. The last person to interview him was Stephen Fry about this book, so I was next in line after Stephen Fry. So genuinely quite. I mean, his name's Roger Lewis, I should probably say, and he's written this book called Erotic Vagrancy, which is about the lives of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. And I'm not a film historian, or even very knowledgeable about film. I have, and we've actually discussed a Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor film on the podcast very long time. He's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, but this was absolutely out of my area of expertise. I've never interviewed anybody. And it's not exactly a subject well, other than what's in that book. I mean, I suppose I know books well, so in that context, I could at least lay claim to sort of having an idea of where this sort of thing could go. But anyhow, so then I just waited. And, in the days before, I was shit scared, to be honest. But also sort of excited. Again, we talked about this sort of flow idea, like the ideal of life is to be in the flow state. And the flow state is when you're pushing yourself to the absolute limits, but you're also engrossed and enjoying the thing that you're doing. And I think it's one of those ones where you just know that no matter how it goes, you'll be so glad you did it. Telling yourself that over and over again doesn't necessarily always get you through no
it.
Difference. No.
But just knowing that, at 6 p.m, once it's done, I'm going to feel better.
And exactly that. And
not
anyway,
just better, but like really good.
I did it.
Something hard.
And it's a bit, again, I think I probably was in a flow state. I mean, it feels a little bit like someone else did it once you finish it, just because you're so nervous and what have you. But exactly what you just said, afterwards, once it was done, and he seemed quite happy, and, it was fine. It didn't, it wasn't an embarrassment. I don't think I was good, but I think it was fine. No, I'm not asking for, don't worry. I'm just saying. You were very good, baby. But once it was finished, it was, and I'd compare it probably. The only thing I can think of, and I think this is quite a good example of of what we talked about last week, about this sort of putting yourself into uncomfortable positions in order to actually experience meaning, transcendence, awe, and spirituality. It's a bit like going for a job interview. No one really likes going for a job interview, and we all have to do it at some point in our lives. And really, unless the job interview and you think that you've completely embarrassed yourself, generally speaking, and I can only speak for myself because I don't know what goes on in other people's brains, but I assume it's probably very similar. When you walk out of an interview, you feel brilliant, because even if nothing else, you've got through it and you haven't got to worry about it anymore. And in a way, that feeling is what happiness is to me, you know. And I think we you know, like we talked about on the last episode, we're too busy trying to just not experience the kind of difficult aspects of that, not go through anything, not come out the other side of anything, but just be made happy immediately, so that we're just smiling all the time.
And then you haven't earned it, so it immediately tails off and you're looking for the next thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, you literally don't experience the thing that you would have experienced if you'd put yourself in a difficult position. It's like, it's a different thing entirely. If if you can just make yourself happy by sitting on a couch and eating a bag of crisps, that's actually not the same happiness as you get walking out of a job interview having gone through something really difficult, or or something else. I don't know, doing a long when you do CrossFit events or something, whatever it is that you put yourself through, which is hard.
I think it's also that not to bang on about duality too much, but you can't have one without the other. You can't have happiness unless you've had difficulty, because how would you know what happiness was? If you're happy all the time, it would soon not feel like happiness and just feel like normal. Which is what most people have with this like ease of, I didn't have to. We were talking about it with cooking, like, if you just get a meal delivered to your house all the time, sooner or later, that element of your life just becomes so boring and normal that maybe the pleasure in cooking or the pleasure in eating just disappears because it's just so basic and normal for you.
Well, that's the comfort of the modern world, though, isn't it? The more things that are made comfortable and easy, the more we think, oh, that's brilliant, I don't have to worry about that anymore. And I get that.
But everyone's low-level sad all the time.
Well, yeah, exactly, because they're not actually going through anything.
Yeah.
You don't even have to cook your own dinner anymore, or you don't have to pick your ingredients anymore, or you don't have to plan anything anymore, or you don't need to...
I think there's something about going through hard things, and especially, actually, when they go wrong, that makes you realise... Because it's your worst nightmare, and this is CBT to an nth degree. Like, you're so worried that something's going to go wrong that you're already anticipating it'll go wrong, so you're already anxious. So one way of thinking about it is trying to think of the worst case scenario and what would happen if that happened. Another thing is just having it happen. I can relate this to when you're in a band and you play really badly, and you... Or for whatever reason, you can just tell a gig's gone completely wrong and it doesn't feel good. Pre that happening, you're like, that would be my worst nightmare. I will curl up and die. Everything will be so bad and I'll never, how will I get over it? And our first gig was like that, 100%. But it's so important to have failures like that, because the more it happens, the more you just realise... I mean, you can't just do it all the time, and you've got to learn from it, I guess. But what it does teach you is that you don't die. Nothing bad happens. And actually, people forget. Like, we drum up so much in our brain about if I fail, this will happen, this will be bad, I'll feel bad, people will remember it. And you can just catastrophize it and go round and round and round thinking all the bad things will happen. But actually, the amount of times we fail and... the worst thing doesn't happen, you do move on, you probably learn from it, and the amount of people that might actually say, you know what, I wouldn't change it, I probably, I've benefited from having that failure. Whereas if things go good all the time, when you do have a failure, it'll feel like such shit, and it'll be such a struggle. You've got to have bad to have good.
You got to go without
to go with. But I just think you can just learn. Like, I feel like I'm in a position now, finally, gosh, not all the time, but where I really respect failings quite.
Well, there's a rite of passage, involved in that. So, for example, the example you used of being in a band, everybody that has ever been in a band, which is I don't know what chunk of the society that is, but it's a decent amount of people, has at some point had that experience.
Yeah.
And so what you find is that that's the thing. If you talk about community, that's something that you can all. It doesn't matter if you're talking to someone in a jazz band and you're in a hardcore punk band. You can all say, "Oh, there was this time when I played this gig, and this happened," and they can say, "Oh shit, yeah, there was this time when I did." And that's a type of community, and it's like I say, I think it's a rite of passage. And I mean, you started being in a band very late in life, but I mean, for most people, that stuff happens when they're like 14. And of course, you look back, I mean, we all did loads of stupid shit when we were 14. So, but there's also something about making memories, which is what you talked about last week. Like, maybe this isn't a good thing, but like a good chunk of as far, I've been in bands for fucking years and years and years. And a lot of the gigs that just went by and they were fine and they were quite good, I don't remember.
Yeah.
The ones I tell stories about are the ones that there was some sort of disaster, or somebody else did, or either I or somebody else did something very silly. I remember my brother's band. I think in fact, I don't think I even played it. I think when I was about 13, my brother's band played this gig at our school, and I think my band had just started and we wanted to be on. Anyway, whatever. I don't think we played this gig. Anyway, they all went and drank like supertenants in the car park because they were 14-year-old boys.
Yeah.
Beforehand, and they were absolutely wanker, but one of them was much more wankered than the rest of them, and in that way that only 14-year-olds can get, who've never really drunk before. And he was rolling around on the floor, and there was just teachers. It was just like some teachers and some students in this more or less empty.
It wasn't a school assembly. It was like 11 in the morning.
No. It wasn't an assembly. It wasn't an actual gig, but it was kind of a gig that they'd arranged to put on at the school. It was, it was an evening gig, but it probably started at 6 and finished at 8 or something.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
I can't quite remember the exact details, but the point is that is over 30 years ago, and I would never forget it, and I can still picture him rolling around on the floor. And I've been in contact with the guy here and there. My brother's vaguely in contact with him too, and I'll always have a fond memory of him. I'll always, but I don't know why I thought of that, but there you go. I mean, why would I have thought of that? There was one gig I played once when I was doing acoustic stuff just on my own, and I turned up and it wasn't very packed. It wasn't a very packed room. But there was a big group of extraordinarily drunk, I guess, students. I would guess that it was a big group of students that were there. And so I'm playing my little nice acoustic songs. And when you play an acoustic, if anyone's ever done it, it's kind of hard when people are a bit boisterous. And this group of students were wankered, absolutely wankered. So they were, clapping at the right time. But they definitely, they weren't listening anyway. Anyway, halfway through one of my songs, one of them got up to go to the toilet, walked across the front of the stage and proceeded to vomit a huge amount of vomit right in front of me, in front of this stage. And that was bad enough. I mean, that's pretty bad as far as reactions go. But worse still, of course, I couldn't stop playing, so I'm still playing my little song. And the manager of the thing came out, proceeded to tell the person off. And I don't think the person could even speak English. So it was really loud and kind of somebody really shouting, and he didn't understand. And then brought him a mop and made him mop up the vomit whilst I was playing the next song.
Vomit?
Well, a mop and a bucket. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I wasn't really paying attention to exactly what was going on. I just saw a student with a mop in front of me,
smearing vomit all over the floor.
The show must go on. It's like, what could I have done? I could have just sort of walked off, I suppose. I don't think anyone would have cared, but I felt the need to continue. I'll never forget that. That was probably 20 years ago. No, more than 20 years ago.
I love that.
So. Yeah, so sorry, I've gone completely off piece. But the point is that you'll remember those things. You'll never forget your first gig that you did, even if you think that it didn't go very well.
Oh gosh, yeah.
You'll never forget it. You'll never forget. In 50 years' time, you might be dead, but let's say 30 years' time, you'll. I'll give you 40 years. In many years' time, you'll still be able to remember that.
Yeah.
But you won't remember the ones that were just fine.
Yeah. All the in-betweens.
Or you might remember some of them. Or if they went particularly well, you'll also remember them.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot that you won't.
But I think you're right. It's about comparing things that go completely wrong. You remember just as well as the things that go really well. It's just that in-betweens that you don't really remember. So if you're going to fuck it up, really fuck it up.
Really,
if you're going to do well, try real hard. But everything in between, you won't remember it. So if it goes a bit wrong, don't worry about it. Even you aren't going to remember it, let alone everyone that came to see you or is around you when you have a big fail.
They'll only remember it if you really fuck it up.
And then you created a memory for them.
I sometimes think Gigi Allen just once had the shits and it all just went a bit wrong on stage. And then everyone really remembered worried, that.
Yeah.
He was just really worried, and he was a really nice guy then. And then...
He made a career.
Well, not really a career.
Not really a career.
I think that's pushing it a bit.
He didn't live long enough to have a career. Gosh. Bless him.
How old was he? I think he was in his mid-30s.
Was he mid-30s?
I think he made it to about then. Might have been early 30s. It was something like that. I would have known this once upon a time.
It's not too bad.
Not too... Well done, Gigi. You lived till you were 30, let's say 3.
Definitely thought I've popped it long before then. Long before then. Bless him.
So...
Shouldn't really bless Gigi, I don't think.
I think you can bless Gigi. He's dead.
True.
So maybe that's quite a good way of moving into this, because I mean I think if you have any sort of political standing of any sort that isn't basically that you think everyone should be dead, then you probably don't like Gigi Allen very much.
No.
That would be fair. So maybe that is a good segue into what we're going to be talking about.
Jargon.
So this came up on the last episode, and we talked about an idea in which we could all just give up politics.
We could just do it.
Now, I know that there will be a lot of criticism about this idea, and we're not really any further down the rabbit hole than we were last episode. So last episode I mentioned the fact that I'd been thinking about it, but that I could see that it had some pros and cons, but that I thought it was an interesting idea just to discuss.
Yeah.
And so now we're just going to discuss it and see what comes out the other side. So I'm not sure exactly where I sit on the fence of this, but the example that I gave, and I'm going to say it again, even though I think this is more or less, I keep saying it this way because I think it's really probably going to push people's buttons. And I think that's probably quite a good way to start is, and I can't remember exactly the wording, but something along the lines of, I'm giving up politics. I'm no longer going to be anti-racist. I'm just going to be kind. I'm no longer going to be anti-sexist. I'm just going to be caring. I'm no longer going to be anti-anything. And I remember this, actually. I remember these were my exact words. I'm not going to be anti-anything. I'm just going to be forgiving. And I think forgiving is a word which we'll probably have to explore a little bit because it's not a word that we're really into. And it's definitely a very religious sort of a word. So... we might have to get into that. And it's brought up a bunch of thoughts on my part. I think we talked about what the potential criticisms of this were. I mean, one of the main criticism, and let's just get it out of the way first, is that you don't have to be not one thing in order to be the other. You can both, you can both be a very outspoken anti-racist and be kind to people. Yeah. Although when we touched on this, in that context, it's like, well, what do you do with racists? Are you kind to racists? And you're probably not in order to be that. So there is something there. But I think we need to acknowledge the fact that this is probably a bit flawed. And I know for a fact that a lot of people would just say, that's just kind of like giving up, or whatever. That's, if you're not actively anti-racism, then you're a racist, I think, in some people's eyes. And I get it. And I'm not entirely... bereft of that. I don't know if bereft is the right idea.
Go with it.
Of that as a concept. But I suppose ultimately the thoughts that I've had which are in its favour, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, maybe let's start with this, is that and this isn't just in the punk scene, I think this is just generally most people, particularly people on the left, and to be honest, let's also acknowledge this, I only really know people on the left. I mean, I'm outside of maybe a few family members and stuff, and I'm sure that's true of most people listening to this. I feel like, particularly on social media, although let's try not to just go on about social media too much because we did that a lot on the last episode and on every episode we've ever done. But I think just generally we are very keen to, and I will use this term, virtual signal our politics as much as we possibly can. But I don't necessarily see that many people doing anything really outside of just talking about it. And I think that what politics has become for a lot of people, but certainly not everybody, is writing something on your Facebook wall or putting a rainbow flag on your Instagram profile or
saying fuck the Tories before your gig.
Saying fuck the Tories at between every song almost. I'm not going to mention them, but we watched the band the other day whose first song was about how you should just do whatever you want. And the singer said, just everybody have a really nice time, do what you want, dance. We're not going to tell you what to think or what to do. You just got to do it yourself. And then proceeded between every single song to tell them what to think. which I thought was quite funny, and it summed something up to me. It was kind of, but again, it felt very empty. So of course, whenever if someone says "fuck the Tories," everyone in the room cheers, right? And that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm certainly not offended by that or anything. But but has anybody ever thought what the point of that is? Like, what actually happens as a result of that?
But at that gig with all that, we've always said "fuck the Tories," and the Tories are bad, but now Labour's in and they're bad too. And I was like, everyone knew that this was what was going to happen.
Yeah.
The conversation here isn't to shout at someone, "These people are bad," and then the next people again, "and these people are also bad." It's like, so what do we do with that?
But yeah, but I was going to say, that is what politics is, I think.
Exactly that. And I think, but politics used to be, why don't we just try and figure out the best, what is the next stage? What is the next thing? What do we want to change? What do we want to happen? Not, these people are crap. Because that's how Labour got in. Like, those people are crap and we're not those people. And now they're in and everyone's going, well, you're crap too. So who's next? It's like the ideas and the thought and the trying to speak to people about their opinions and what actually needs to change is on the back burner, and what's at the front is, those people are rubbish, we don't like those people, they don't like these people. I just it seems pointless to me.
I'm not sure you're totally right, but that's all right, but saying that it used to be a different way, I think to some extent it was. I mean, I think there was a lot more, and let's just talk about punk generally, but I think mainstream society up until the last 10 years, really, politics outside of like major party politics, every 4 years everyone would, well, not everyone, but a bunch of people would go and vote. They might watch the party political broadcast, but other than that, really, politics didn't touch, I don't think, a lot of people's lives. When I was a kid, the parents of most people had no interest in politics whatsoever, and the few that did really stood out. My mate had a dad who was really, really left wing and was sort of like really old school Labour, and so we all knew that. We all knew that was what that guy's dad was like, sort of thing. And so the fact that they stood out makes me think, like, now no parents who wear a rainbow t-shirt on a certain day of the year would stand out in any way.
You're right. Maybe.
So, and that's a good thing. I mean, I think that's because because the punk politics have sort of won out almost, if you like. Not entirely.
I feel like the last time was probably in the 90s, and then since then, even when it was bad, it wasn't that bad. I mean, obviously there was some dreadful things in like the mid 2000s generally, but that was the whole world. And I kind of feel like the first and last time that I was actually like mostly, I remember like being really engrossed in stuff, was while I was at uni, and it was like, it was interesting, but when I look back, like, there wasn't that much to argue about or moan about. It was pretty middle of the road.
But that's kind of the old school way of doing it as well. Looking at it is that, like, I think in the past, and this is extraordinarily simplistic, and of course this isn't absolute, but politics was something that you engaged with when you were a university student.
Yeah.
If you look at, watch a comedy thing from the 70s or the 80s, that was kind of the joke, was that, all of the, look at the young ones or whatever, all of the uni students were the ones who were sort of...
But then historically, like, the protests that have really made a difference in the world, like, if you think the 70s or the late 60s and the 70s, it was student movements that were the big political protests that maybe did make any differences, or maybe... So, I guess it's like, it's not just a cliche, I guess it's also like... There was a time when student voices and student brains, political-wise, were the ones to kind of watch, and they did take actions when actions meant anything. I think that's fair, and I don't think that we either have the knowledge or and we obviously weren't there to really be able to critique those things. But in the context of my lifetime, I can say that I'm not actually sure that much protest has really genuinely made a difference. And again, I know that's a pretty big thing to say. Not in the Western world?
Yeah. Or, I mean, to some extent, it's hard. You can't, there's no point in us having this conversation because we're not clever enough or we don't know enough. But I'm just saying, like, because I took part in quite a lot of protests when I was younger, just because that's the sort of thing, I was a punk, and that's what we did in the 90s or whatever.
And there's a community in it. You do, at least for that moment, feel like you're really doing something.
Oh yeah, no, it's great.
The next day you realise maybe.
Well, it's great, but then therein lies another problem with if protest has become something that you do on social media. It's kind of then the same problem that we're talking about with everything else.
Yeah.
The good thing about going to those protests is that I felt, I made memories.
Yeah, to be with other people.
I don't think I made any difference. And I mean, the ultimate one for me which was something that was very much sort of a part of, I suppose, my maturity or whatever, was after September the 11th and the anti-war protest that happened, which was genuinely the only time I ever saw, and of course, again, my knowledge is very tiny, and I'm not pretending to be an expert, but the only time that I saw, I think there was, again, I think there's different numbers thrown around, but there was more than 1 million people that marched through London saying we shouldn't go to war on a day where there was also not as quite as big marches, but massive marches in, I think, every city around the country. Yeah. And of course, nothing happened. And that was the point for me. I mean, this is obviously 23 years ago or whatever. Yeah. But, I remember that march, and I remember the fact that there was, having up to that point, all of the marches were with people that smelled of BO, looked a bit like me, had funny coloured hair. There was about, 50 to 100 of us, maybe, at the most. And of course, those didn't make any difference in the grand scheme of things. But when you've got over 1 million people, and a lot of them are like grandmothers and normal fucking people who definitely weren't, just going to protest so that they could possibly have a fight with the police for fun, made no difference, to anything. And I think that's when I personally, for me, I was a bit after that. And of course, it's just a personal experience. Yeah. I'm not saying that protest is completely pointless as a result of my one big, experience. But I was just like, so what was the point in that? Did we actually get anything done, or did we just sort of talk about stuff? And I still question that, and I don't know what the answer is, and I'm sure the vast majority of people, and certainly anybody that knows anything about politics, would say, well, that's absolute nonsense, and protest is the only voice that we've got, and we need to do this. But again, I don't see necessarily lots and lots of people going out on the streets and protesting anything. I mean, in fact, as far as I could make out, and I don't follow the news, I admit, so maybe I'm completely wrong about all of this, but during COVID, the people that were against masks, they really got out there, as far as I can make out. Maybe they just made a lot more noise.
I think one of the things that maybe is part of the world now, which, you were thinking in 2001, 2002 that those protests weren't helping so much, but people who were there probably had based their opinion on some truths or facts or some work, and they weren't there because they knew they'd get in a photo, and they weren't there because they knew they could post it, they'd done it. Whereas I think now we enter this world a little bit, and I think you used the word virtual signaling, and so I think this might be a similar way of using it. It's whereby I personally, I'm just owning up to my absolute ignorance here, I personally don't get involved in things of that nature because I just don't feel like I know enough. I think there are things that are so complex that I don't know where to start. I know the general gist of things, and I have a general opinion on what I don't think should be happening, but my opinion isn't going to solve anything, and I can see when things are bad. I can see when things are completely unjust, but I can also see when they're completely unjust on both sides, and I just don't know what to do with that. And I think I don't want to call it pressure, but this world that we live in that seems to be valuing an outright opinion, and this kind of insinuation that if you're not having an outright opinion, then you must suck. You must have the worst one. It's a bit like, and I bring this back to your being like, I just want to be kind, not actually say I'm anti anything, I just want to be nice. Because in that it is involved that I won't be doing those things because I'm a kind person and I'm a forgiving person. And I feel that way a little bit about the situation we're in. There's this pressure societally to have a stance and to stick with it. And every stance you take is a stance against someone else. And I think you can end up in a real moral minefield eventually. There are things that are obviously wrong. But those people are going to remain wrong so long as you're screaming at them, you are wrong. And if we don't take any opportunity to understand why someone thinks different to us, and we don't have to agree with it at all. But I feel we talked about this on the last episode, really. It's the premise that if you're arguing with someone about a political point, how likely are they to change your mind into their way of thinking? And the answer is, I would think,
100% of the time, if you question someone about that who was arguing with a racist, a homophobe, or whatever, the answer would be absolutely zero. Of course, they're not going to change my mind. I'm not even really listening to what they're saying or reading what they're saying. Yeah. So what do you think they're doing?
Exactly. And we just force ourselves into these little bubbles. And the other, if I'm left and surrounded by left people pressuring me to out a left opinion, otherwise I'm clearly the other way. The right probably have the same. There's probably some really mediocre, I don't really have an opinion on this, and I'm sure it happens that way. It happens everywhere. And I think we get into a situation when we are strongly opinionated, we forget. I've been thinking about this a lot recently and trying really hard to reflect on it. Everyone is convinced they're right. Everyone. And I am realizing at work I have serious control issues. I've been trying to look up how to delegate to people you consider completely useless, and it's really and that's not maybe the right question to ask, but I'm genuinely struggling. And I know that deep down when I think about it and reflect, the core belief is I'm right and the other people are wrong. And that's not a helpful belief to have if you want to start working with other people, but I think it's one that we have societally everywhere because we're not challenged and we're not thinking about other people's opinions. We're being told, you are in this group, you must think this, and if you don't actually say that you think this, then you must think the other thing. And so people are going, I think this, and they're not taking a second to work out, what do I actually think? Do I actually want to consider what my opinion is before saying this, just to make sure I don't look like I'm the other thing? Can
I also say, though, as well, we put people into those groups.
Yes.
So there's a wide range of, if you want to just look at say left and right, right, and you just see that as a continuous spectrum, there's still even though I think things are extraordinarily more complex than that, there's a huge amount between those things. But what we do is we take anybody who is slightly further in the other direction to us, and both sides do this as far as I can make out. So if somebody says, I don't know, if someone says I'm not racist, but of course we know that they definitely are about to say something racist. But if someone who isn't outright racist says something about, for example, immigration, right? Depending on where you are on the spectrum, you will probably say that person's a racist.
Yeah.
But whereas there is discussions to be had around immigration, I for the record hold what I imagine most people here would be thinking would be the correct outlook on this. But I can appreciate the fact that somebody else who has been brought up differently to me and has a different opinion about things and maybe has read different things than me or seen different things than me or experienced different things than me or lives in a different part of the country to me might have, thought out, even if I disagree with them, ideas about immigration. But the problem is that if somebody who is perfectly not racist in any way, but just has maybe an opinion which is slightly further to the right than me about immigration, if I say, oh, that fucking prick's a racist, then suddenly they become that. And so then it's just pure transference of me now. Person A is a racist, so therefore everything that I hear them say or do,
they're so right wing on everything now.
And so not only are we doing that, I suppose what I'm trying to say, not only are we doing that to actual people that are opposed to us in their opinion, we're also doing that to people that are probably not opposed to us in any way and are actually more or less exactly the same as us, but just with a slightly different opinion about one or even 10 different.
And what you might end up doing is pushing them in a direction.
Of course, that's what you do. That we've done over the years.
So there's someone called Sam Harris, we've mentioned him before, who when we first started listening and watching his podcast or the things he was on, he was being interviewed mostly, and it was on some kind of maybe slightly difficult podcasts where the idea was that they were exploring the not socially acceptable or maybe the not socially mainstream opinion.
I think sometimes with just to quickly, some of those podcasts though, you don't realise what their aim is until you've watched a few of them, and then you suddenly think, "Oh shit, I've just seen what this guy's trying to do." So you can just go in and be like, "Oh, that sounds like an interesting conversation between 100%. Two people," and you could watch 3 or 4 of them and think, "God, they're both really cool, aren't they?" And then one of them, it will just sort of be like, "Oh, you've got an anti-woke person on, and you're gonna suddenly come out with all of these ideas I wasn't quite expecting, or whatever."
But so Sam Harris is someone who, when we first started watching stuff that he was on, the impression that was given of him was one where he was quite disliked, and it was coming from a purely political. So just in case you don't know who he is, he's a cognitive scientist who has found some sort of fame by talking about. He's very critical of religion. He wrote a book about called The End of Faith while he was at uni, and so he's got a weird career. He's got paths where people know him via him being prominent in the atheist movement and very, very critical of religion, specifically Islam. You've got his political opinions that are quite divisive at times, but he's also a keen meditator, and he's used cognitive science to apply spirituality without religion. And so he's done an awful lot for people who are quite spiritual and regardless of political leanings. Then he's got quite strong political leanings, opinions.
Also,
and then he's very, very openly anti-religion.
He's also extraordinarily intelligent.
Very intelligent.
And so sometimes, because another thing that we talked about on the last episode was about, appreciating that there are people more intelligent than you and sort of reading them or experiencing them in some way. And sometimes the problem with some of these people, when you find out that they hold different political views to you, is that you also have to accept the fact that they've obviously done a lot of thinking about it. Doesn't make them right. Yeah. It doesn't mean that you should therefore go, oh shit, he's saying that and he's cleverer than me. Yeah. But I think generally speaking, when we talk about people on the other side of the political fence, we just assume they're all thick as shit. And the thing is, of course, some of them aren't.
Extraordinary.
And so if they're not, then you may not, you still don't have to agree with them by any means.
I mean, but when we first started watching and listening to podcasts that he was on, and not just specifically him, but the kind of podcasts they're on, when I say difficult, it was because we were watching people talk who had completely different opinions to me and who were very intelligent. And you're like, it's really interesting to hear that side, really well thought out and spoken. I don't agree with it all, but I can see where people get their ideas from. So anyway, the reason I bring up Sam Harris is because he specifically says, I am not left or right or central, because I have opinions that are left, I have opinions that are right, and I don't. And he's removed himself from things like Twitter and stuff because he was digging himself in a hole. And he goes, I have no fans. He goes I have enough people that hate me on the right because I'm not right enough. I have enough people on the left that hate me because I hold right opinions and I'm not left enough. I have people who hate me in the centre because I'm too wishy-washy. He's just that's why people pick a side, because you find a community that you can agree, you can be bolstered up and agree with. He's like, but I apply my intelligence and my thought to everything, and that means some of my opinions do end up one side and some of them do end up another. And again, I don't agree with lots of his opinions, but that idea of he's removed himself from having a political siding, which I think is the beginning of this thought around abandoning politics in some way, because
in some
politics in our world right now is you are left or right, and actually left and right don't even mean anything, but yet we still stick by you must think this, you must think that, and I think we neglect what is the best outcome right now. Why are we not even discussing it? That might lead to a left ideal and a right ideal, but we have to be able to have those opinions, we have to be able to have those conversations without it being too pressured to say, well, you're this, so your opinion on it must be this. And it's like, well, actually, it might lean a bit. The other person who I think about is Rory Stewart. He's Tory, but loads of his ideas were very, very left. And he got shat on in the Tory government for having those opinions.
But I suppose, but in a couple of things.
Yeah.
What you're saying there is right, but also kind of almost goes against what I'm trying to say. The thing is even considering an idea left or right or centre itself is putting everything into a political context. What I'm talking about, my idea or my sort of vague thought about giving politics up, is that just to remove that layer, that film, of how we might see ourselves and other people.
That's what I was trying to suggest that Sam Harris is doing.
But in a way he's not. In a way he is, and in a way he's not. Yeah. Because the way he's not is that he's still describing his various beliefs as being a certain type of politics, but also, maybe more importantly, he's still involving himself in those politics. So this is the thing. There's no need for Sam Harris to have an opinion about transgender people. There's no need for it. Yeah. He does so in a thoughtful way and in a very scientific way, which is quite challenging. But there's no need for that. He doesn't need to do that, particularly, and he's quite a good example of this, when he's got this other life where he's actually providing people with some good.
Yeah.
He could just concentrate on that. And I get it, because he's obviously, again, he's very intelligent. He's obviously always thinking. When he doesn't mind giving his opinions about things. We're literally sitting here doing a podcast where we don't mind giving opinions about things either. So, I mean, I get it. I'm not sort of saying he shouldn't say anything about anything. But it's like the idea of giving up politics is more about just like removing that entirely from your life, because being kind to other people is not a political act. It's something else. And in the past, it would have been considered a religious thing, possibly, or a spiritual thing. But now we're a secular society and we don't have that. So ultimately, the point where I was kind of getting to, which I think we sort of got to, is that if we just take for granted that most people are bothering themselves with a lot of political thought, putting themselves into different groups, possibly arguing with others, possibly not arguing with others, but certainly sort of going on their social media and surrounding themselves with certain political ideas, but actually in reality aren't really making any difference to the world. And again, that's very simplistic. I'm not saying that everybody fits into that thing, but I do think that our society generally encourages that. What it encourages is for us to talk a lot about things. And again, I appreciate we're literally doing a podcast where we've been talking for the last hour and a bit about lots of different things. But so, you know, I include ourselves in this as well. But it encourages us to talk about things, but without actually doing anything about them. And I think that that's led to is a kind of weird, I think, like a division in our brain where we don't necessarily see that that's what we're doing anymore.
You think, but we think that talking about it is the action. We've confused it enough that we're like, well, I've said my opinion, so that's, you know, that's it. I've done it.
I don't know if this metaphor is going to work, but I think that this is absolutely like an example of this. There was like I say, I work in a bookshop. Somebody came to buy the Extinction Rebellion book. I don't think it's called Extinction Rebellion, but I might be wrong. But anyway, it's written by written by the people, I think, or maybe person who sort of started that movement. And we had a copy of it, came down to the till, whatever, and he said, "Oh, I was going to buy this book, but it's a bit scuffed on the edges. Could you order me another one?" And so, or actually, this wasn't to me. I think this was to somebody else, because I got a later version of this. And so they ordered him another one. That one came in. He came back, whatever it was, a few days later. And this one had kind of got, again, it was very minor. So this is the point where I saw it. It was like the corner was just like literally there was a tiny, but people are funny about books or whatever. Yeah. But anyway, there was this tiny scuff on it. So he came back and he looked at it really closely and he said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I ordered this because the other one was scuffed and this one's got a bit of a fold in the page. Can you order me another one?" So, I it's just my job. So I just did it. But at this point, and I don't know after that, I didn't see him after that. I assumed the next one came and it was all right and he bought it, but I might even be wrong about that. I don't know. But the point is that he obviously couldn't see how absurd this was. And hopefully people listening can see how absurd this was. Yeah. But just in case you can't, just think about how much of an effect that literally has on the environment, having to ship single books for to a shop that then potentially, because we live in Hastings and not many people, there's a lot of Extinction Rebellion stickers up around the place, but I can assure you not many people are reading the book. And so it's just going to sit on the shelf. And so and it's like he obviously, but the point that I'm trying to make, and nothing against the person involved really, but it's just that there was absolutely no connect in his brain between the fact that he was buying a book about how we're about to be extinct because of all the environment problems, whatever you may think about that, it doesn't really matter. The point is he obviously was at least interested in it and couldn't see the fact that what he was doing was terrible for the environment. Yeah. And in a way, you can look around, these people that are super gluing themselves to the M25, and I know this is a really simplistic argument, and I appreciate that there's a lot of arguments against this, but fundamentally, that's awful for the environment because loads of cars are just sitting there with their engines on, waiting for them to be peeled off, using loads of chemicals to get their, and it's all minor things that we don't necessarily think about and probably shouldn't think about. But there's something about that absolute disconnect in our brains between we'll say like, oh, I recycle. I'm really good at recycling. I recycle everything. But then we'll buy a 6-bedroom house when there's only one of us.
Yeah.
Or we could ever do that.
But, this literal 1-bedroom.
But I just mean like there's these sort of, and I think that's fine. I think you have to have those disconnects in your head. In fact, if you didn't have those disconnects in your head, then you would go completely mad, because if you thought about every single possibility of everything.
Yeah.
But there is just something like glaringly obvious about some of these things that I don't think we're noticing. We're busy saying, all the right political slogans.
Yeah.
But we're not necessarily doing anything about them. I've had another one, and I'll say this as well, and this is very much a customer service experience. A lot of people, this is absolutely fine. Maybe I'm pushing this point too far now, but I do kind of think I've had this quite a lot, to the point where for some reason I've noticed it. A lot of people have got big badges on that say like Free Palestine and stuff, right? Absolutely fine. But I've found that a lot of the people that have come in with a Free Palestine badge on are very rude, right? Now, of course, the two things aren't related in any way, right? Not at all are they related. I get it. But it's kind of like, on the one hand, you've done this thing where you're like, I'm going to signal to everybody that I think the right thoughts and I'm a nice person.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to come in and deal with someone in a shop who I've never met before, I'll never meet again, I've got no idea about them, and I will be actively rude to them, or I'll be difficult or whatever, or I'll purposefully make them feel a bit shitter than they were today. And that's where, I think that the reason I bring that up, I appreciate it's very obscure and pushing the point, but the reason I bring that up is because that's where I got this idea from.
Being
it was kind of like,
but you can't be kind.
Do you know what, if you didn't have that Free Palestine badge on, but you came in and you were really nice and polite and maybe made a bit of conversation, or maybe were just a nice person, I would probably just assume that you thought Palestine should be free.
Yeah.
The badge doesn't make up for you being an arsehole.
Yep. But it's about outwardly showing, this is, I'm right on, and actually, but inwardly you're an arsehole.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, I'm making a huge presumption, and I know that, and I really am trying to use this more as a metaphor, that I'm not saying that every single one of those people that I'm talking about is an arsehole, but I'm just saying that there's this kind of disconnect between what we're trying to show the world. I'm sure there always has been. I've been watching The Good Life recently, and Margot and Jerry in The Good Life, they're trying to show everybody that they're really lovely people, but of course in the sort of joke is that they're actually just all in it for themselves.
There's a we might have talked about this before. I think it's something that I want to say it was Paul Kingsnorth said it. That chap that you've mentioned before for sure, might even be when we were still called Breakfast Punx. And he is someone that used to be in the Extinction Rebellion sort of stuff. He used to be with Greenpeace. He used to do an awful lot. He's applied his time and his efforts to a lot of protesting and being outwardly spoken. And now he has found God. He's Christian, and he's actually basically a little hermit with his family. They live with as little as they can possibly manage in some little commune in Ireland. And he said something that I think is really it resonates with me a lot, and I think it applies to this, and I think the world does the opposite. He was just like, outwardly conform and inwardly rebel. And it's something about to yourself, do the right, not to yourself, but do the right thing outwardly. Be polite. I think politeness is something we've completely lost. And Alan de Botton talks about it all the time. Politeness involves not telling the truth all the time. If it's telling the truth to everyone, if there's people that you absolutely can't bear in your life, but actually there's no need for you to say that, and you just need to get through the day being polite, and actually there's no need to not be polite. Just be nice to that person. It doesn't matter. But there's something about getting on with things. Because his answer was about changing the world. It's just actually the world's really hard to fucking change, and it is bashing your head or impossible, maybe. And it's bashing your head against a wall. Going to all these protests, I haven't read all of his stories, but I know that he had a lot of problems, and there was even within Extinction Rebellion and Greenpeace, there was still hierarchical problems and things, and you're just gosh, where does it end? It doesn't end. It's everywhere. So the way you change the world, in my opinion, is being nice to other people, changing your immediate surroundings, and that starts with maybe that little conforming outwardly, whereas I think we do the opposite. In society we scream our opinions, or what we think our opinions, and our outward is rebel and protest, and inward we're not nice to the people directly around us. We're sad to ourselves because we're not looking after ourselves. We're miserable without meaning. And it's like, actually, it's probably meant to be the other way around, and it will influence out. Like, find meaning in your own life. Be kind to the people directly around you. Make time for your friends and stop making time to post things online to people you don't know. That bit will not bring you the joy. But, you know, the bit around you, even if you've just got like one friend, go and speak to them, message them that day.
But I think, I think politeness could be seen as being very superficial. And I'm sure my example of I'm sure most people would say, well, surely, freeing Palestine is much more important than someone being nice to you. Mm-hmm. And of course that's true. But I disagree that politeness, base level politeness to strangers or to anybody, but to strangers specifically, is not important.
Yeah, no, I think it's important.
I know you do.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm just saying, I think it's extremely important.
Yeah.
But it's not just important from a sort of superficial, like, oh, Dave's not had a very nice day at work because some people have come in and been rude to him. I don't mean that at all. No. I used to be a psychiatric nurse. I could give a fuck if people are rude to me, for the record. It doesn't affect my life. It doesn't affect my life at all. No. But the reason I bring it up is more because it's things like that which actually, and I there's nothing scientific about what I'm about to say. This is just my experience of life. But I know without question that this year, basically, I made and I think I've always been fairly polite because I was brought up by a very anxious mother. But this year I made an active attempt to be nice to people that I meet, to try not to have a negative attitude when going into something that I have no right to have a negative attitude of. But most importantly, just to try and make everyone I meet feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. Now, I may not have done that very well. I'm not saying I'm amazing as a result of that. I might have done it incredibly badly, but in a way it doesn't matter. Because the thing is, it's made my life infinitely better. Mm-hmm. And as a result of my life getting way better and my interactions with people getting way better, I've got happier. And as a result of getting happier, my interactions with others have got even better. And there's been a continuous positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
And I felt that. And I can't prove that. I can't really even explain fully what's different or what's changed.
But it's your reality.
But I absolutely know without question, having lived on this earth for 44 years and having generally been a bit of a fucking depressive, that this year has been revolutionary and revelatory to me. And really all I've done is be a bit more polite to people.
And what a change it's made.
And it's made a huge change. And so in that context, I don't think that these little things that's, again, wearing a Free Palestine badge, there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. Go for it if that's what you want to do. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's not going to change your life. No. Some other people that also agree that Palestine should be freed might say, oh, nice badge, or give you a thumbs up or whatever. But then equally, there'll be a bunch of people that really don't think Palestine should be free and will probably give you a load of grief.
There's also the flip side, and you see this in the veganism, when veganism was trying to kick off, and it is kicked off.
We had a right old pop at vegans last episode.
Did. But it's the same thing. You can have the correct opinion and be an asshole, and then if you're an asshole to someone, you've got the correct opinion, that person might be like, that rude person thinks that, and that might take, if you were you're wearing that badge because you want other people to agree with you, and you want people who don't already agree with you to look at that badge and go, you know what, maybe I'll have a think about that. But I tell you what they're not going to do if you're rude. They're probably not going to think about that. They're probably going to actively think, people who hold that, because we're simple, we're fucking dumb. People who hold that opinion are arseholes.
Even if it's
if you want to go really,
it might be a subconscious thing.
It's the same with veganism. I didn't meet anyone that became a vegan because it was screamed at by a vegan in the street.
I don't know any vegans that don't say things like, oh, vegans are a fucking nightmare, aren't they? And I'm talking about actual, real proper, dyed in the wall vegans who believe that all other vegans are terrible.
And I just think we have this idea about saving, I know someone who's really right on, really makes their entire social media presence about doing stuff, having all the correct opinions, going to all the marches, bad mouthing people who don't do anything. I also know their husband, and their husband is miserable because she's horrible in real life. She's refusing to take part in their family. He's the only person working, and I'm just like, I love that you have right on opinions about saving and changing the world. But your tiny little world of your children and your husband are miserable because you're actively not involved with that. And I think, have all the opinions you like in the world, but I don't respect people who only hold those opinions and do not affect their world around them. Because if you affect the world around them, it shows you're a good in my opinion, you're a good person if you're good to the people around you, you're polite, and you want to make a difference in your world. When you only want to make a difference in a world that is maybe you are a part of, but that is much larger than you, and you're not making a difference to your own little world, I just think there's no point. I find it really awful because I just feel like I don't know. When people just don't look after their world around them, but are holier than thou, and badmouth people who don't have these wild and large opinions about changing the world, I'm just like, you're not nice in real life. I just can't bear it.
But also all of those opinions can be critiqued. So I'm not sure if it was Paul Kingsnorth, but there's another guy that he used to work with called Dugald. Can't remember his surname. I think it might have been him though. Wrote a fantastic book called At Work in the Ruins, which I would really recommend, but I can't remember his name, so it doesn't really help. But you'll probably find the book if you look it up. But he made the point that the environmental movement, why he lost patience with it, wasn't because he stopped believing in it by any means, and he was very similar to Paul Kingsnorth, like really involved in everything. Yeah. But it was because he realised that the people that were involved in it, whilst they were very genuine, what they were trying to do was not save the environment. They were trying to save their lifestyle within the context of saving the environment. And if you think about the entire environmental movement, whilst, again, I would consider myself an environmentalist, I'm sure most people listening to this would as well. But if you actually think about what it is that we're talking about often, it's not about how do we save the planet? It's about how do we save the planet but still fly every year? How do we save the planet but still have a car? How do we save the planet but still get all of our fruit and vegetables in very clean packages? And of course the reality is if we actually want to save the planet, what we've got to do is do away with all that shit. None of us should be driving anyway. We should never be getting planes. We should, I mean, that's maybe a bit extreme, but I don't think it is extreme actually. We certainly shouldn't be buying mushrooms in a plastic packet. Therefore, that entire movement can be critiqued. Now, just because you're on the right side of history, which I think unquestionably, if you're an environmentalist or you're into green politics or whatever you are, still you might have it a bit wrong, but not know about it. And again, there's probably a divide there. You don't really think about the fact that you know that some of the things that you're doing aren't actually as sensible as you think they are, because you haven't realised the fact that actually all you're trying to do is maintain your nice Western middle class lifestyle, when really if we actually wanted to save the planet, we all need to just go and live in the Unabomber's hut. And
I think but then it's also about and people are not able to do this, realizing that you can be flawed. It's that thing that I love saying about what John Ronson said, like, I know other people are assholes because I am an asshole at times. And I think it's the same thing. It's like your morals are always flawed. Like, I know people who are vegan, but they go and spend tons of money on, I don't know, posh, stupid things that come in posh packaging. And
or the McVegan burger.
There's just, exactly. There's so many. You're always a balance. You're always to do good. There's always something else. No one is perfect. Everyone,
no one's even close to perfect.
Like we are, none of us are anywhere close. Everyone who's got a stance has something else about them that outweighs it somehow. You can be vegan and holier than thou, but you can drink tons of booze and be an annoyance to all your friends and family.
Or do coke on a Saturday night.
100%. There's just so many like hypocrites. We're all hypocrites. We're literally all hypocrites. We all do one thing and do another in various ways.
But we're also not what we appear to be often. So, and I think that's another important thing in this regard. And this is very much a social media thing. But I want to just pat us on the back because we haven't done too much bashing of social media this episode. No. But now I'm going to. Okay. Because we can pretend to be something that we're not as well. So we and often I'm sure that this is people aren't aiming to do this, but you don't share the things about yourself which are ugly. You only share the things about yourself that aren't. And so therefore, if we're we might have the best sexual politics in the world, for example, but then we're watching the worst pornography in the, we're not going to post on Facebook, I watched a brilliant porno film today where someone got a black eye. We're not going to do that. We're going to without even thinking about it, we're just not talking about that bit. We're just talking about the fact that we went on a protest for women's rights.
Or if you do that, it's performative. Like there was this thing with people like, oh my God, no makeup, selfie, everyone should do it so you're your real self. But it's still a very, it's probably the 10th photo people had taken. It's in really lovely lighting. No makeup meant something extraordinarily different to everyone because lots of makeup was used in something. It's just like, this is
But the thing
you're doing the other thing and it's still performative.
But even if everyone did that completely genuinely, it's still a flawed idea because you're saying that it's like incredibly brave to post a picture of yourself without makeup, which in of itself feeds into the problem with the world that we live in.
100%.
I was going to do a big, long metaphorical bit about Maya. I think that's how you say it, the Hindu idea of Maya. But we've run out of time.
We have.
So I'm not going to do that.
Well,
I might save that for next time.
Next time, because I don't know what you're about to talk about. So maybe it would be nice.
Well, also, I think I've done enough metaphors at this point.
For one episode.
For one episode. So yeah, I think we'll have to call it a day. But the podcast is just turning into one long conversation, which
I like.
So I think we will be picking it up there. Next time, and then we'll just see where we go with that.
We'll start with Maya, and goodness knows what will end.
Well, I also don't think that we've come to a conclusion about whether we should give up politics or not. In fact, I think we've literally scratched the very surface. So maybe this is what this podcast is about now.
Well,
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we can feed back in the transcendence and spirituality. Maybe
we've got every other week for our whole lives, Siobhan.
Exactly.
We will see
but you should
again.
act as if you're going to die tomorrow.
Oh yeah, of course. We should. We will see you again in 2 weeks' time.
Maybe
every other Thursday.
Yeah.
This has been the Sohbet Punx podcast. Mm-hmm. You can email us if you'd like at shamcityroasters@gmail.com. You can probably find us on Instagram if you want. Tell your friends if you'd like. That would be really nice if you've enjoyed this because. Not being really on social media, we have no ability to actually tell anybody about this thing. And now we have a name that hopefully they will be able to find. You might be able to do us that favour, but don't worry if not. It's no problem. I hope you've enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time.
Diddly-doo.
Goodbye.
Ciao. Bye.